In today's video, I'm going to be trying my hand at typing in a game from one of these 40-year-old computer magazines. Will it work or will I fail? Let's find out together. Recently, I've become obsessed with computer magazines from the 80s, and one thing that has fascinated me is the allure of the type-in game listing, with their fantastic artwork and stories. So much so, I've amassed a massive collection of magazines, as you can see behind me, with these just being a few of them, as they are a bit too heavy to all move on the desk here. But as such, I've been itching to have a go at typing in some of the games. And as it's now been just over a year since I released my last Coding Like It's at the 80s video, where I thoroughly enjoyed typing in some of the listings from these Usborne computer books, the games, however, were somewhat lacking. So I can't think of a better time to have a go and type a game from a magazine in myself, even after hearing horror stories from what some of you have experienced doing this in the past. But I'm up for the challenge, so I've picked up this 1984 October issue of C&VG, which features 7 type-in game listings, including one that claims to be Frogger. And if a magazine listing can recreate this, I'm going to be super impressed. So let's start with this one for the Commodore 64. So I've got the C64 all set up here ready to type in the code, but before we do that, let's first check out the listing in the magazine. Okay, this listing is spread across 3 pages. There's a 2-page spread and also this page here. And you have got to appreciate the illustrations in these 80s magazines. If I just lift this up a bit so you can see, this one appears to show Frogger running away from what looks like a black cab in front of Buckingham Palace. So I guess he's took a trip to London. And up here, as always with these 80s type-in listings, there's a little description of the game with some exposition as well that I'll just read out for you now. Here's a great game for Commodore owners who've been hopping mad recently. You won't see a better version of Frogger anywhere. The graphics in this game really are like the original arcade machine, so if you've been waiting for a good Frogger but haven't got around to buying one, then get your typing finger ready. You'll need a joystick to control the frog plugged in to port 2. Just in case you've never played the game, here's what you have to do. Using the joystick, your job is to guide your frog across a crowded road. Once you've managed to dodge the cars, then you come to a river. Here you have to hop across by jumping on floating logs or the backs of turtles to avoid drowning. You can move your frog in 4 directions with the joystick. So there we have it. I'm not sure how they got away with admitting to cloning Frogger. I mean, was this something you could openly do in the 80s? And calling this the best version ever, even stating it has graphics comparable to the arcade version, which you have to admit sounds pretty amazing. So let's find out if the code matches the hype and get this program typed in so that we can try it out. So there we have it, all typed in. And firstly, I will say that did take a lot longer than I thought it would. With some breaks, I've been at it for a good 3 hours. And secondly, I'm not holding out much hope of this program actually working, as I'm pretty sure I made quite a few errors typing it in, given how hard some of the listing is to read in the magazine. Anyway, I've been saving it as I go along, and I've just loaded up the last save, so let's run it for the first time and see if it works. Well, that was at least 60 seconds of nail-biting trepidation to see if that would work, and as suspected, we have an error. But I was a little surprised that it did take so long before eventually crashing, which I guess does mean that something was working behind the scenes. So give me a minute to try and debug this and I'll be back. Okay, I'm back, and there seems to be a theme going on here, as again, like before, error checking this code took me way longer than I thought it would, but I am pleased to share, as you can see on the screen here, I've got the game to a point where it does seem to work. I'll just stop it here. And I will say, I'm already impressed, as I wasn't really expecting such a graphical game that actually resembles Frogger, especially considering it's written in BASIC. Although I have noticed the graphics do seem a little corrupt, which I will touch on in a minute. But going back to the errors in the code, like I mentioned earlier, I did make quite a few mistakes. I even roped in the help of my younger brother at one point to read out these two big lists of numbers. One for what I assume is for defining the graphics, and the other for the machine code element in the listing, whilst I quickly checked what he called out against what I had on the screen and fixed any errors. Then there were some silly mistakes which were clearly my fault, as I think I might have zoned out a little bit whilst typing this in. One example being, because of the lack of spaces in the listing, reading O's as zeros. As you can see here on line 105, where I've put if y equals 980 or y equals 66, instead of if y equals 98 or y equals 66. And lastly, because like I say, some parts of the listing are really hard to read, so it really was a guessing game of what actually to type. This was especially apparent on parts of the listing that required PETSCII characters to be typed in, hence why the screen graphics currently look a little bit messed up. So again, let me do one final check to find out what's going on with the graphics. Once again, I'm back for what I hope is the last time with this listing. But finally, it's with great relief it now looks, after all that back and forth debugging the code, we've got a working game of Frogger. Graphics wise though, I will say working out which PETSCII character was printed in the magazine was a total nightmare and took way too much time. With a good example being line 61170, as if you take a look here and compare what's printed in the magazine to what I found the correct characters to be, it's no wonder I got them wrong first time. But if anyone knows of an easier way I could have worked out the characters based on the data in the code, then definitely let me know, as it would be interesting to find out. Anyway, that's enough talk on the code, let's check out the game. Okay, so I've just started a new game here, and I will say my first impressions of this was that I wasn't super impressed with the graphics, especially considering it is a magazine typing listing. But I do find some of the movements slightly janky, especially when trying to get on these turtles up here. They can be slightly difficult to hop onto like that, and it can also be a little bit tricky to play and talk at the same time, but I am trying my best. But overall, like I said, I am really impressed with this game, and I think back in the day I would have been super happy to get this from a magazine. Definitely let me know in the comments if you would have been happy to type in and play this one. Okay, now that's too addictive, as I keep going back for just one more go. But we need to move on, as even though I might regret this decision later, given what it took to get Frogger working. And like I said, I was super impressed at how this one turned out, so I am now interested to find out if this was just a fluke listing, or are the other games in the magazine as good as this one. So I thought, let's have a go at typing in another one from the magazine on a different brand of computer, so that we can compare games. But before I get to doing that, I just wanted to say, for anyone who wants to check out this version of Frogger for themselves, I will leave a link to a disk image containing the basic program I typed in that can be run up on either a real C64 or emulator in the description below. And again, just one more thing before we move on, as I can't think of a better time than now to introduce today's video sponsor, PCBWay, who have been making high quality PCBs now for over 10 years through their low cost, quick turnaround fabrication services, and have recently expanded their services to include injection molding, CNC machining and 3D printing to help bring your projects to life. They also have a great community that I use a lot, full of retro projects that can be easily browsed and ordered. So if interested in finding out more, please check out the link to PCBWay.com down in the description below. So to speed things up a little bit, I've already gone ahead and typed in another game called THUNDERMAN here on my TI-99 4A, which you can see if I just type list here. And listing wise, I will say this was a lot easier to type in than the last one, as I had no pesky PETSCII characters this time holding me back. But obviously it wouldn't be a type in listing if there wasn't some errors, which thankfully I've managed to work through in record time, and all in all this one took me just over an hour to type in and get working, which I'm sure you will agree is a lot more reasonable than what it took to get Frogger going. But before we run it, let's first check out what I will say is quite the backstory for this game in the magazine. So, like before, this listing is split over 3 pages, and I will say I was really impressed with the artwork in this one. We have what looks like a proper comic here, explaining the story of THUNDERMAN and how he's saving all of these people from the building. And the game has a lot to live up to when you consider the backstory that I'll just quickly read out for you now. So much for town planning. The largest building in Los Angeles has just been opened, but no one seems to have told the builders how deep to dig the foundations. But what's that in the sky? Is it a bird or a Russian spy plane? No, it's THUNDERMAN, and only he can save the people trapped in the luxury building. Help our hero THUNDERMAN to rescue the people from the building before disaster strikes. You can guide him up and down the empty lift shaft with E and X keys. Once you have picked up some survivors, guide them to the safety of the helipad on the roof. Remember that even a superhero can't carry more than 6 people at once. So now it is time to play the game and see if it lives up to that backstory. So I'll just type run here. And I will admit I have played the game briefly while I was debugging it earlier, so I do know how it works. Basically, we're playing as THUNDERMAN here, what I assume is THUNDERMAN, although it definitely doesn't look like the THUNDERMAN that was in the magazine, so we might just be playing as the lift. But we're trying to rescue these people from the collapsing building, because apparently everyone in this universe is too lazy to use the stairs in a disaster situation, and instead it just decides to yeet themselves down at the lift shaft. But it does take a while for them to walk over, so while we're waiting, I'll just briefly compare this to Frogger, because I do think it isn't as graphically advanced, but this game does have sound, which is kind of nice. There's a nice little sound that plays when they do fall down the lift shaft, if that happens. But they're walking themselves over, and the problem with this now is that we can't predict who's going to get to the edge first, and sometimes they get to the edge at the same time. Then it is a bit of a guessing game over who's going to jump and whether we're in the right place to pick someone up. But I can see there's one here that's nearly to the edge. We'll try and move to whoever looks closest. There we go, that one's close to the edge. Let's see. They're walking, the one at the bottom's now getting close. Everyone's moving there at the same time. So we're going to try and get the right one. There's 2 right at the edge. Let's try this one maybe. Nope, the one at the top just jumped off. There you go. Let's see. Nope, and that one. Right, is he going to get in the lift? Yep, there we go. We've got him in the lift, so we can drop him off to the helipad at the top here. And the game basically continues in this way until we've run out of people to save. There we go, that was THUNDERMAN. Let me know what you think of this one. And like with the last game, and for those interested in playing this, I'll leave a link to the code in the description. So that was 2 out of a possible 7 games we could have typed in from this magazine. But seeing how good these games were, I've done a little Googling and I've managed to find 3 more of the games already typed in, so I thought it would be fun to quickly check them out. First up, we have a loop-de-loop for the ZX Spectrum. And in this game, we're playing as a roller coaster that we have to direct through all of these hazards. And I'm controlling this with the keyboard here, going left, right, up and down, and also braking as well, which is probably the most important thing to do, as you just saw me crash into the wall there because I didn't brake. But this game has 9 levels of varying difficulty, although I've played it for a little bit, and I will say that I've found the first level to be the trickiest. But overall, I have had quite a bit of fun playing this one, and I do think that you could get a good few hours of gameplay out of it, just trying to get through all of the levels. Okay, so next up we have Bouncer BERT for the VIC-20, and there might be a little bit of a theme here, but once again we are guiding our character, this time BERT, the green kangaroo, through a series of hazards. But as you can see, they're moving left and right, so we do have to be a little bit careful with this. And I will say, there is 4 levels to this game, and I did manage to complete all 4 of them in about 5 minutes earlier, so maybe not as fun as the other games. And I think if I had spent all the time typing in the listing, I might be slightly disappointed, but I guess you can't win them all. And finally, we have Enchanted Castle for the BBC Micro. And this is quite a big listing. I won't show you all the pages, but this does run over 5 pages, and it's only part 2. Part 1 was in the previous magazine, which just made me think how many people bought the other magazine, typed it in, and didn't realise they'd have to wait a whole month for a game they could actually play. But we'll get it started, and it says press A key on here. And I have to admit, the first time I played this, I thought it literally said press A key and was pressing the A key rather than press any key. But I know we can press any key to get it started like that. And this is a text adventure with some quite cool line graphics. And I assume everyone knows how a text adventure works. But I've played this a little bit, and I kept getting thrown back to the beginning by various different enemies and getting stuck in rooms. But I'll just show you an example here. So we're in at the first room, and it says the exit is to the east. So we'll go to the east. And now we're in the second room with a coffin. So if I type open coffin here to open it up, and oh no, it says an angry vampire has jumped out and attacked us, and we are now dead. So we have to go back to the beginning again. But this is definitely a game that I think I will go back to and try and see if I can finally figure out how to get to the end. So there you have it. That's 5 programs from just this one C&VG magazine. And given all the stories, both good and bad, I've heard about magazine listings, personally I will say I'm quite impressed. Especially when you consider the price of the magazine was just 95p, as opposed to $5.99 upwards you would probably pay for a game. Obviously, most people only had access to one system, so it was effectively only buying one game to type in, but I suspect magazine sharing was a thing, so friends with different systems could type one in as well. Or maybe even on the school computer. Did you do that? And errors all today were of my own doing, but I've heard some listings just flat out didn't work, and you had to wait sort of unknowingly till next month's issue to find out if there was a fix. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed my little exploration into magazine games listings, as it was fascinating to experience firsthand both the thrill, frustration and reward in doing so. So definitely let me know which one was your favourite, and if you have any recommendations for magazines I should check out from this era. Lastly, I just wanted to thank all of my new Patreon supporters, which for those who don't know, I only started a few weeks ago, and one of the member perks is to have your name in the video, which I'm happy to show them all here. Plus, thanking Patreon member David O'Reilly for diamond support. Hope you find the few places where I've hidden your name in this video. But that's all for today. I'm now off to see if I can get 4 frogs safely across the road in Frogger.